Good morning, good evening, and welcome to the session on best practices for optimizing your cloud spend with AI. And for this session, we have an incredible guest with us today, Jignesh from Morningstar. Jignesh is an industry expert in engineering and FinOps. Jignesh, thank you so much for joining us today. It's always great to work with you and your teams, and I'm excited for our conversation today.
Absolutely, Ravi. First, thank you for having me. Expert, I'd use that word lightly, but I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's great to be here today, and excited to talk to you about some of the best practices we've kind of used as in my career, as well as in our different enterprises that I've been at. But more excited about the future, right? What can AI enable us? How do we get better and smarter with costs? Because who doesn't love saving money?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I can request you to start with a quick introduction about your role at Morningstar and also what brought you to FinOps in your journey.
Absolutely. So my role at Morningstar actually has FinOps in there. So I have cloud platforms as well as DevOps, and part of the cloud platforms is cloud FinOps, kind of governing cloud costs, how we approach it, how we report back, how we charge back, all of that.
Yeah, amazing. Perfect. So thank you for that introduction. And before we get into leveraging AI and automation for specific use cases in FinOps, like none of that really matters if the people who need to care about cloud costs and act on it don't, right? So maybe let's start with talking about how do you foster a culture of cost consciousness among your engineering teams and your engineers? How do you talk about the importance of having a cost conscious culture with them? And also, given the reality that engineers really care about compliance, quality, security, stability, in that reality, how do you get your engineers and engineering teams to prioritize acting on and caring about costs?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Lots to unpack there. I think it starts with leadership. So from our top down, our CEO, CFO down, we've always, especially Morningstar being a ratings company and getting people to invest money, we also want to be smart with our money and how we use our money, right? So it starts with leadership. One of the things that Morningstar, which has been beautiful, is some of our star rating systems and the capabilities that we created for our investments and mutual funds. We've carried that also internally over to how do we report on costs. So we have a cost rating system, which gives each product team and each P&L a view of how many stars are you on any given week.
Right.
And that report goes out weekly, and folks are actually held accountable to that via two mechanisms. One, we actually do chargebacks. So now it hits above the line, which hits margins directly, so which affects bonuses. So of course, at the end of the day, you're going to care about your bonus. Here's a quick and easy win for you to care about that, or how to ensure that you're being cost aware and driving it. It's almost like what you are and I were talking about, Durkin saying it's a stick that's shaped like a carrot, right? So let's use it. That's one way, right? The other way is making it easy. Let's not make information hard to find. So dashboarding, alerting, all of that absolutely helps. And dashboards which are effective. So they log in, they see it. But now we've actually gone a step further and used CI/CD platform and CCM together. And so now that information is up front. Like, hey, what's this deployment going to cost me?
Right.
Is there a better way to do it? How are the recommendations going to help? And then lastly, through governance, right? Which we do through either, we haven't gone there yet, but we soon will, through auto stopping, ensuring that non-prod, we're optimizing spend there and architectures before we're pushing to production.
Got it. Amazing. So it sounds like leadership mandate, leadership involvement, also like empowering them with the right tooling, whether it's with visibility, optimization, governance, and all of those things.
You got it.
Fantastic. So now, in terms of how we approach FinOps at Harness, it's very similar to how we approach the entire SDLC, right? So the first part is like our first approach is to provide comprehensive tooling for any use case that you might need. And the second part is to be able to introduce AI and automation to take away that manual intervention and, of course, maximize ROI, right? So if you look at the different use cases for the comprehensiveness, we have cost visibility first, which is like all of the tooling required to give you a hierarchical breakdown of cloud costs across your organization. Then you have cost optimization, which is the tooling to help you cut costs and realize hard dollar savings. And then you have governance, which is essentially those checks and balances and guardrails to make sure that your cloud costs are where you want them to be on an ongoing basis. Now, the second part is of course, like bringing AI and automation into these use cases. So let's start with maybe talking about the cost visibility side. And that essentially involves like cost allocation for cost reporting, whether it's chargeback or showback, including things like allocation of shared costs, right? Now, while we've always enabled customers to create complex dashboards and reporting, what we've noticed is that these dashboards and reports are really useful for certain types of personas. But then there are other personas who simply don't have the time to even engage with complex dashboards, right? So we looked at leveraging AI to do what we call as dashboard intelligence, like using simple natural language prompts to actually automatically generate tiles for dashboards that you can use for cost reporting. And then on the other hand, also what we call as conversational FinOps, where you can simply use natural language prompts to derive insights from your cloud costs without having to look at detailed dashboards at all. So in that context, first of all, are you one of those personas who doesn't have time to look at complex dashboards? And more broadly, like, have you seen this challenge of like, you and your teams will put a lot of effort and care into providing this kind of detailed visibility, but do you find it to be sometimes a challenge to have the different stakeholders fully consume it and in the frequency that you want?
Yeah, guilty as charged. I often go to my lead FinOps manager and I say, hey, I need this report and I need it now. And so it's like he has to drop everything and go get me that report. This is a game changer, right? Because now I could go in myself and say, this is what I'm looking for. Give me that report. Like, how much was our cost last month as compared to this month for this particular product or this particular service? Yes, absolutely. That's going to be a game changer, not only helping personas self-service, so my other FinOps folks can focus on whatever they were focusing on versus answering my one-off questions immediately. Not only am I going to be able to self-service, but I'm going to be able to drive things better, conversations better. So absolutely.
Fantastic. So coming to the next cost management pillar of cost optimization, right? So broadly, optimization can be at the architecture level, like, early on to make sure that your architectural approach is the right thing from an application or service standpoint. Then you have rate optimization, where you're leveraging the right kind of tooling from a rate standpoint from the cloud providers, be it RIs or savings plans, cuts and suds, or even negotiated pricing like with EDPs and PPAs. And then you have optimization of resource utilization, right? Like, so to track and act on idle cloud resources, right size over provisioned resources, clean up unused resources. What are your thoughts on best practices for a FinOps practitioner who's trying to implement optimization across these three areas, and potentially how can they leverage AI and automation?
Yeah, break those two apart. I'll answer your first one first. Optimization is hard. You got to be able to know what you want to go after, what's right, what's wrong, because you got to balance that with performance sometimes, right? Because you may want to optimize something from a resizing perspective in prod, and all of a sudden your performance takes a huge hit. So you got to start all the way back on architecture and non-prod testing. So you got to do performance testing, you got to benchmark it, you got to figure out what level is right for you to be able to scale up, scale down, how long that is going to take, and then push to prod. So you're already pushing to prod something that's optimized. So I think a lot of it needs to be built up front, and reporting needs to be done at a non-prod or a lab environment level before prod. To take the second part, how's AI going to help with a lot of this, is that AI, to me, is going to be able to solve a lot of low-hanging fruit. People sometimes don't have time for that low-hanging fruit, but there's still significant savings available in that low-hanging fruit. Unused EBS volumes, unattached EBS volumes, unused DynamoDB tables.
Yeah.
We've seen it all, but it's only $100 a month or $200. But you multiply that by 1,000, it's significant now, right? So I think that's where AI is absolutely going to help, and automation is going to help on just clean that up on a weekly basis.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a great point about like balancing performance versus cost as the first consideration. Right. So like they say, like you don't need a Ferrari to compete with roller skates, and you can't use roller skates to compete in a Formula One race. So it's all about finding that right balance. Any other insights you have from a cost optimization standpoint, and where do you see the future of continuing to leverage AI from a cost optimization standpoint?
I think AI is going to really bubble up what's important, what's the target that you should go after, what's going to give you the biggest bang return for your investment in going after these costs, right? One of our approaches in the past has been, hey, what are our top 5, 10? Knock them off every week. If you continue to do that, you're going to get to low-hanging fruit, which AI is going to be able to help with. But really, one of the things I really liked about your dashboards is that you guys actually weigh 2 options. One's performance-based option, and one's, do you want to take 100% of that potential savings? Right. So you could still balance the 2 without compromising performance.
Yeah, fantastic. That's a great point. Like, one of the best use cases to leverage AI is to actually find insights and opportunities to optimize costs. So that's a great point. And coming to the cost governance side of it, right? So governance can be for cost management, security, compliance for any of the cloud resources that you're running. And what we actually introduced is the ability to automate this cost governance, right? And this automation is through like YAML policies that can be either simple or complex. And what we actually found was the authoring of that YAML policy itself can be hit and miss, right? Like, not everybody is familiar with authoring YAML policies, and sometimes for complex use cases, the YAML policy becomes complex to author. And so we introduced the ability to author these through an AI assistant, right? So it essentially, with a simple natural language prompt, it can generate this YAML policy on your behalf. And also, when you have existing complex YAML rules that somebody else has created, it can actually explain to you what that's doing in simple English, right? So with that, like, how big of a problem have you seen cost governance being across your organization? And also, are there specific use cases like tag compliance and so on that have been areas that you've tackled before?
Who hasn't had tag compliance issues, right? Yes, and yes. And let me break that down. I think one of the biggest places we see that is in our sandbox or lab environments, where one of our policies has always been, once you hit a certain amount of spend threshold, you can't go above it. You just get dinged or you get reported on, but no one takes any action, right? And so this I love, because now we could actually not only govern, but enforce via simple, I'll write a prompt and say, hey, our sandbox environment spends can't go above $500 a month. If they do, shut it down. Write that YAML for me and go apply it into this OU.
Yeah.
Which I absolutely love, because now we're controlling spend at the lowest level of someone just saying, hey, I want to test something quickly and forget about it for the weekend, right? So that's going to be a game changer. The other place that I see it is tag compliance on which workloads are AI workloads, which ones need GPU, which ones don't need GPU, which is our heaviest databases that we've sort of allowed to use the higher RDS instances or R-type instances or whatever that may be, and govern them differently than anything else. Silo them based on either tags or accounts, and allow them to run certain types of instances there, not anywhere else. So again, we're not getting anomalies all over the place. And that's the other thing I'm excited about AI is better anomaly detection and driving savings quicker, whether that be through alerting through teams or taking action.
Well, that's a great point that you brought up as a use case for AI and machine learning to proactively help you catch cost anomalies, right? Like cost spikes when the spend of a service or a SKU is outside of business as usual, and being able to proactively alert your team so that the action is immediate and not at the end of the month. Do you have any stories of your own about cost spikes that you were not able to catch in time and now you can?
Yeah, I mean, who hasn't, right? It's either someone's left something running, or all of a sudden someone's trying to um, ingest data in a database or a DynamoDB table, and it scaled way beyond what they thought they would or should.
Yeah.
But the problem is, even forget end of month, you get it the next day or the day after, because things don't settle right away in AWS or the Microsoft world.
Yeah.
But I want to catch that sooner.
Yeah.
Like, hey, this has already crossed your daily, hourly threshold.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And setting that up, Robbie, sorry, one more thing. And setting that up in a Microsoft or AWS cloud dashboards or whatever the place to set them up, Cost Explorer, is impossible to do across everything, right? So if I'm able to do this in one place and govern it, fantastic.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that's a great point. Like to have a unified way to set up and track these anomaly detection policies, but also the ability for you to act on it much faster than 30 days. Like, even in the later in the same day, 2 days later, the impact could already be very significant.
Time is money.
Yeah,
Time is money.
Exactly.
This way, this is the bad money.
Exactly. And sometimes it's a lot of money depending on the anomalies. That's a great point. Now, we've talked about all of the different aspects that a FinOps practitioner and a leader needs to take into account today, right? But what is your view on a FinOps practitioner of the future? Like, what kind of skills will be important for this practice, given all of these trends in AI and automation and so on?
Absolutely. Great question, because it's one of the ones that I've struggled with. I think the traditional role of a financial analyst is changing, especially when it comes to IT spend. A financial analyst is going over IT spend, et cetera. I think they do need to have a good understanding of how the cloud works. What are RIs, what are savings plans, what are mechanisms of cost savings, as well as understanding costs a little bit better. What are the drivers or detractors from cost, et cetera. I think that's changing. And then two, something that you and I have always chatted about is, now that all the dashboarding is done for you, you've built all these governance policies, you're automating the reporting, you're automating the optimization, you're automating the governance. What are you going to do now? Now you're going to be able to actually add value in a different way. In my mind, it's reporting 2.0 on what's the value of cloud? What is the value of this workload? How can I tie it back to the business value? What business revenue or value is this particular workload adding, and how can I get to the unit cost?
Yeah, that's those are really great points. And so we've talked about how to leverage AI for specific use cases within FinOps. Now let's talk about the other way around, right? So how do we leverage FinOps practices to look at the cost of actually running AI in your organization, right? Like the aspects are like how do you track the cost of running AI? How do you prioritize AI so that like people are actually acting on it and there's actual adoption going on? And how do you actually track the value that AI is providing to you? Like, what are your thoughts on these areas?
That's a new one, obviously, that everyone's going to have to struggle with, because, AI became a buzz about 2023 and everyone's like, hey, I want AI. Everyone wants AI, but no one still figured out how to, one, do it responsibly, two, scale it well, and three, account for it. And so one of the things that we did is we created where you can and cannot do AI, meaning we siloed things in accounts and subscriptions on, here are your accounts and subscriptions where you can have AI workloads. Here's how they'll connect to other things. And then you monitor the heck out of it, right? So even AI needs a overlord watching out for what am I doing? Am I doing things right? Is my spend going to spike, et cetera? And so I think that's where tooling and alerting is absolutely going to help us, because those FinOps practices still need to be in place to make sure that we're doing things right by the company. We're being good stewards of our financials.
Right, that's fantastic. So on the one hand, it is to provide the right environment and a restricted scope, or like siloed environment, so that the impact is not wider ranging, but also providing the right tooling for monitoring and making sure that the costs are not going out of control.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So we've talked about, providing a cost conscious culture, or enforcing or cultivating a cost conscious culture with engineering and engineering teams. We've talked about leveraging AI and automation across the different FinOps use cases of cost visibility, optimization, and governance. We've talked about like the FinOps person of the future, and how do you leverage FinOps principles for actually consuming AI. And I think all of your insights would be invaluable to our audience. So again, thank you so much for being with us today.
No, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for tuning in. I hope you enjoy the rest of the event, and see you next time.